Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So I need to give a shout out to someone sent me super cash at the very end of the other video. Elephant in the Room, I believe is the name, and I may have gotten that wrong. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to check the chat. But if you ramble anymore, you're gonna be Rachel Maddow. That was essentially what this comment. A little bit of a dig. Hurts my feelings, but that's okay. So first, I want to thank all my patrons, all my subscribers, everyone who donates super cash, everyone who shows up just to listen to me ramble on. You guys are immensely appreciated. Thank you very much. Second, I had the opportunity to see this. I'm a creature of Twitter now. And being a creature of Twitter, every so often I would see something that piques my interest. And this was one of those things that piqued my interest. Bullshit, man. Haha, wow! Young Turks unlisted Jimmy Dore's video on aggressive progressive from the main channel. He destroys Russia hysteria so TYT hides it. Typical. Only 1,800 views. Now, I went to their channel to see if this was true. So this came out on the 7th. I don't see it. He's right. They unlisted that video on their main channel. Unless they have a different main channel somewhere. Videos. It is not there. Now, I don't know if it was there at one point and they got rid of it, or they just said, fuck this, we don't want this showing. I have no idea. But it is not on their main channel. So, there's a piece of this that I want to show because Jimmy Dore flips out. And Jimmy Dore is absolutely right. And the question becomes, is Jimmy Dore talking about his own network? Like, somebody told me one day, something like a subtweet, where you're saying something, you know completely who you are talking about when you're saying it. You're not naming names, but people fit that particular description. People fit that particular description. Let's take a look. Let's take a look.
On somebody, it's like, no, that's not even remotely accurate.
You are going to see comments underneath this video on a Young Turks channel saying exactly that same shit to me, saying that I'm a Putin puppet. I saw something, I did a segment on the main channel. There was a comment where someone said, why is Jimmy for defending Russians? What? Could you imagine saying, why is Jimmy defending Mexicans? Or
now, just to give a little context, they're having this conversation about the Russiagate narrative, and Jimmy Dore is tearing into this narrative. And in tearing into this narrative, he jumps to this thing of lefties who's pushing this narrative, making a point that I've made before, that you're punching yourself in the face if you're a lefty and you're pushing this kind of Russia nonsense. He's a little harsher with it, he's a little stronger with it, but he is absolutely right in the way that he's explaining it and saying it. I might add a little commentary at the end, but I'm going to let Jimmy Dore do his thing. In this particular case, it's funny, he's like, people call him a Putin puppet and all this other stuff. And by the way, people have been doing that. So, a hack on MSNBC said that Nunes, the one in the Republican Party, who was head of the Intelligence Committee that released the memo, that he might be a Russian agent. He openly said, this guy may be a Russian agent. Slimy Adam Schiff, the lead Democrat in that body, got shredded on Tucker Carlson putting this Russia hysteria nonsense. And Tucker Carlson asked him flat out, can you look into that camera and tell the American public that you know as a flat fact that Russia hacked the election? Dancing man. Just moving and shaking. Could not answer that question because that answer was, of course, no, I can't do that. He can say the intelligence community assessment said, the intelligence community has an opinion on this. That's the best that he could do. Meaning, no, he can't nail down the fact of the Russia thing. They can't prove it. They can't prove it because it was likely a leak and not a hack. And they've been running with the story for the past year and a half without being able to show actual evidence to show that it was a hack. Jimmy Dore is flipping out over this. He's pissed off. So I'm going to let Jimmy Dore do his work. That being said, the person who asked Jimmy Dore if he was a Putin puppet might have been Cenk Uygur. If you listen to that interview between Cal, or that conversation between Cal and Cenk Uygur, the person who was writing that to Jimmy might have been named Cenk Uygur. You need to check the comments person, Jimmy. Let's let him do his thing. He's going to explain how you're punching yourself in the face. If you're a lefty and you're pushing this Russian narrative, you are hitting yourself in the face. You're doing things to undermine your own position in the society itself. And not to mention positioning us in the context of a war. I'm going to let Jimmy explain.
Why is Jimmy defending Jews? Could you imagine someone saying that? But now we're absolutely okay repeating xenophobia because it's about Russia. You're not progressive if you do that. That's the opposite of a progressive. Now, this is because Trump has turned the Democrats into the dumb Republicans. This is their Benghazi. This is a completely made up story, completely. And the fact that people push it on the left is disgusting because guess what? The Red Scare comes back to bite people on the left, not people on the right. They're throttling YouTube right now. They're throttling this show. They're throttling Jimmy Dore show, Secular Talk. Right now, Google is making it hard to find places like Common Dreams and Alternet. Right now, they're doing that. And they're doing it under the guise of fighting Russia.
So, you talked about this a couple weeks ago, how the Democrats also helped and voted for increasing the military budget by $80 billion. Are you kidding me?
So, Steph, you can't say that Trump is a Putin puppet and then give him $80 billion more to go do military action around the world at the behest of Putin, apparently, right? And you can't say he's an existential threat and a Putin puppet and then vote to give him expanded warrantless wiretapping abilities, which is what the Democrats did. Adam Schiff did that. So when they tell you that he's an
By the way, it goes beyond that. It goes beyond that. If you remember, one of the bills that came up, Rand Paul gave this speech in Congress. He was essentially doing like another filibuster. But he was trying to force them to come to some resolution on whether or not they were going to give Trump the authority. Or essentially, the United States is illegally in multiple countries around the world. Illegally. We have nothing in the Constitution that allows us to do this. There has been no law that has been passed to allow Trump to go gallivanting or Obama to go gallivanting around in these countries. So Rand Paul essentially came out and said, you need to authorize this. You need to come up with a new reauthorization and set there in the well of the Senate to force them to vote on this. They voted to give Trump the power to do what Trump wanted to do from a military standpoint. They're terrified of him, but here's all this military power. When Obama allowed this thing of taking information from the NSA and handing it or allowing other agencies to see that information. Now, Donald Trump was going to be the president coming in office. He handed that off to him after Trump was elected. Let's let him keep going.
Existential threat, and he's a Putin puppet. They're lying. They're lying, and if you repeat it and you're on a lefty news show, you are what they call a useful idiot. And you've lost your way. And you don't know what your mission is anymore. If you call yourself a lefty and you're doing a lefty news show and you're pushing this Russia scare bullshit, you are no longer a progressive, you're a useful idiot. Okay. There's a little bit more to this. So there's the Nunes memo that came out. And the Democrats were screaming bloody murder before they released it. And this is what the Democrats were saying.
If he were to release that memo, he would not only be endangering our country, but he would also be violating the rules of the Congress of the United States.
So Nancy Pelosi said if Nunes releases that memo, he'd be jeopardizing everything, our national security, violating Constitution. He'd be doing all that. There's more.
Memo is really reminiscent of the darkest days of the McCarthy era.
There is zero proof or even evidence that there is political bias in the FBI. But if you say it long enough and often enough, there will be people who have doubts about it. And it's a profoundly unpatriotic thing to do.
Yeah, there's no political bias inside the FBI. With a straight face, and there's white-haired Anderson Cooper. Yeah, there's no bias inside the FBI. How could there possibly be bias inside the FBI? Are you out of your effing minds? So when we come back, we're going to continue. We have one more video to show you, a more recent video of Tucker Carlson talking to another Democratic knucklehead. So we have...
Yeah, Jimmy's right. Lefties are punching themselves in the face. I mean, I said it before in one of the other videos. They're taking different tacks. So let's take the two different tracks on this. Trump colluded with Vladimir Putin, hacked the election in order to release factually true information to attack Hillary Clinton by showing that Hillary Clinton and Democrats were cheating Bernie Sanders. That's the first track. The second track is the Cenk Uygur track. This idea of Vladimir Putin has his hooks in Donald Trump because of business dealings of Donald Trump. That's the other track. Now, in both cases, both people come to the same conclusion that Donald Trump is a puppet of Putin because of, maybe different reasons, but ultimately, same thing, that Vladimir Putin is somehow controlling Donald Trump. They don't show evidence for it, meaning the first track has no smoking gun, even though they've been screaming about it for a year. They've shown you nothing. They've shown no, literally, hard evidence for this. The Democratic Party didn't even give them their servers to the FBI. They have shown you nothing. They've shown you nothing. In the second track, the assumption here is potentially true. I can believe that there's some business dealings with Trump and Russia, but you got to prove it. You can't just, I think this is the case. Well, you have to prove it. You have to show that. That's not something where you can just, we got him, even though you don't have anything to really show for that. I can believe it, but I don't necessarily know it. There's a difference in those things. The second point dealing with that, if you're saying that he's being controlled by Vladimir Putin, shouldn't you have something to show for that control? What do you have to show for it? I mean, it's one thing after the next that Trump has done that has been against Russian interests. What do you have to show for it? You have nothing to show for it. The one argument that Cenk Uygur made in this case was, well, he didn't pass sanctions. But dig deeper. He didn't pass sanctions on election rigging because passing sanctions on election rigging would get across this idea that he was somehow illegitimate. And this is kind of going back to what Jimmy Dore said. You're punching yourself in the face. If you're going to make the argument that Donald Trump won because of Russian collusion and that Donald Trump is somehow an illegitimate president, that means, just by proxy, status quo didn't lose. Hillary Clinton didn't lose because she was a failed candidate or a bad candidate. She didn't lose because she picked Tim Kaine. She didn't lose because Democrats rigged the primaries. None of that stuff. She lost because of Trump and Russia. Status quo didn't lose. Status quo didn't lose. All things being equal, one of the benefits of Bernie Sanders not running as a third party was that Hillary Clinton lost on her own merits. The public understood that she lost on her own merits. One of the strongest cases that lefties had was, you lost. You lost to a maniac. You lost to a reality show host. You lost. You lost 1,100 seats. You lost. You guys are failures. You guys are failures. It's time for you to take a seat and let the adults take over. That was one of the strongest arguments that you can make in regards to polling at the levers of power within regards to that party. What happens to that argument when you fall in line with this thought of Clinton didn't lose on her own merits, Clinton lost because of Russia? It undermines your own argument for legitimacy by making their argument a little bit more robust. But it's more than that. I mean, like you said, the Red Scare stuff, this idea that they're attacking lefty networks. And I don't know what's going on the right in a sense, to be fair. But I do know that Twitter, Facebook, like you said, Alternet, TruthDig, these sites, TruthDig and Alternet, were being, I think, dropped like 70, 80% of the number of people who were visiting the site. Russia Today, same thing, attacks on RT. These are hitting us. This is hitting us. And you have nothing to show for the argument. This is kind of what I'm getting at, and I think this is what Dore is getting at. You really have no hard evidence to show for this argument, and yet you robustly have taken this argument purely because you dislike and hate Donald Trump. It's a problem, man. That's all I'm saying. The funny and interesting part here is the person he's describing sounds like Cenk Uygur. And I don't say that out of bias. I don't say that to take a shot at him or anything. Look at the interview between Cal and Cenk. And Cenk Uygur has consistently made this argument that I don't want to have somebody who's being controlled by somebody else. I don't want Putin to be a puppet, etc., etc. He's continuously saying that Putin is controlling Donald Trump. Nothing to show for it. He continuously says it. In this case, Jimmy Dore explicitly says, if you're saying that Donald Trump is being controlled by Vladimir Putin, then you're a useful idiot. Does he know that he's on the TYT network? The other funny part to this was in the beginning where Jimmy Dore said, there's going to be somebody who writes on the main page that I'm a Russian robot or whatever, a Russian plant. You're not on the main page. You're not on the main page, dude. They're not going to write anything on the main page about it because they've taken your video off the main page. They've taken your video down. Your own network, no less. So I'm just going to leave it and say Jimmy Dore is right. This is why people love Jimmy Dore. Yeah, Jimmy Dore's right, man. We'll punch yourselves in the face. This Russia scare nonsense is not advantageous to the left, and if anything, hurts the left. And yet, you have these people on the left vociferously screaming it because they hate Donald Trump. All of a sudden, these guys are into Pfizer. They're into this, mass surveillance. They're into all this stuff because they hate Donald Trump. They hate Donald Trump. You've lost the mission, bro. You've lost the mission. And one last point. Cal made this point of, I've said it differently, but Cal made the point of you allow them to resist without actually resisting. Meaning they don't have to change anything of themselves. They literally just scream Russia and hope that that gets them over the finish line in 2018. Meaning we don't have to change anything of ourselves for the reasons why we lost the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, the presidency, 99 out of what 40 something out of 1,100 seats or over 1,000 seats throughout the United States. You give them a pass. You literally give them a pass on it. Think about what we've been talking about. Think about what we were talking about when we first started, when Trump first took office. The main conversation was on Medicare for all. The conversation even came up with this idea of college or free tuition for people in public schools. These were main things. These were lefty topics. If you're talking about populist topics, these were lefty populist topics. For the last 6 months, what has the conversation been? Trump, 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 Trump in Russia, Trump in Russia, Trump in Russia. That's it. That's taken up all the air out of the room. Even Bernie Sanders has devolved into being a Ruski hunter, sending out tweets talking about Trump and Russia. Sucked all the air out of the room. Your strongest hit was the populist argument, and they're undermining that argument by taking that argument off the table. Not to mention taking agency away from groups like Black Lives Matter or lefties, saying that the lefties were just pissed off because they were being manipulated by Vladimir Putin. And at Black Lives Matter, the people weren't being pissed off, or they weren't pissed off because cops were shooting them in the face and getting off. No, they were pissed off because they were also puppets of Vladimir Putin. I'm going to end it on that, man. Jimmy Dore's right. The left is punching itself in the face. And yeah, I do think lefty media is somewhat useful idiots if they're pushing this Russia hacked us nonsense. I'll leave it at that. Alright guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks guys.